This story didn't start with me wanting to aim train for 120 hours straight, but that's what it turned into. I wanted to test how much time per day you actually have to spend aim training in order to get actually good results. Some of the routines I did were 5 minutes long, some of the other ones were anywhere from half an hour to an hour. I'm gonna walk you through all the routines that I did, but I'm also gonna show you the ones that improved my aim the most. A quick warning, I had to write this script out months later because I was still dealing with the negative physical and mental side effects of doing this test.
I just can't, man. I have such a bad headache.
So please do not attempt to aim train for 5 days straight. Every single Sunday, I host an Apex community games. Normally the people who join aren't really that competitive and they just play to have fun, and that's totally cool. I am extremely jealous of that though, because I am a hyper competitive person. Boom! Fuck you, Fuse. I'm saying all this because I started to notice over time that I started whiffing shots as well as just tracking horribly. I would literally disengage from fights just to not have to keep shooting at people. So once I started doing that, I realized that I needed to get back into aim training. I watched a bunch of videos on how to get better at aiming. I looked at my posture. Sit upright, feet flat on the floor, arms parallel with the desk, and your eyes need to see the top third of your monitor. I looked at my grip. I experimented with claw, palm, and hybrid. I looked at the mechanics of moving your arm around on the mouse pad. You have arm aim and you have wrist aim. I looked at where my focus should go, move here, heal here, kill this guy, move again. I looked at how my eyes should track. The crazy thing about hand-eye coordination is that your hands should move for your eyes, not the other way around. And most importantly, I tried to figure out my sensitivity and really dial it in. Your sensitivity will change over time. There's several ways to figure out your sensitivity, but there's two that work really well, really fast. The slightly longer one is to go into Aim Labs and use Aim Lab Sensitivity Finder. Fantastic tool, it actually works really well. And whenever I compared it to the second method I'm about to use, it was pretty much spot on. The second method is short enough that I actually made a TikTok about this a while back. If you're struggling to find your perfect sensitivity, watch this. First, find a wall and shoot a bullet into it. Back away from the wall, put your crosshair on it, and move left to right, and try to keep your crosshair on it. If you're moving one direction and your cursor keeps trailing in the opposite direction, your sensitivity is too high. If you're going one direction and your mouse is straying the same direction, your sensitivity is too low. You'll know you're on the right sense whenever your cursor can stay on that dot a lot easier. I love you. There were a million different routines that I found that I could run. Some were 10 minutes long, some were half an hour long, some were 2 hours long. So we started off with the easiest one, 5 minutes per day. So with 5 minutes, we need to be as efficient as possible because we only have enough time for 4 rounds. For this, I'm just gonna focus on 4 areas: my arm aim, my wrist aim, my tracking skills, and my snapping skills. Some people say that switching from target to target is a skill, and I kinda agree, but if you really think about it, it's kind of just glorified snapping. So I wasn't really worried about practicing switching. And whenever you're practicing your arm aim, make sure to lock your wrist in place. Act like there's a splint on your arm and it prevents you from moving your wrist at all. And whenever you're practicing your wrist, act like the opposite's happening. Act like your forearm is taped to your desk and you can only move your wrist around. That'll make sure you're isolating each of the different mechanics and your brain will automatically mesh the two together.
Dude, look at all that arm hair, bro. Bro, I just got a Brazilian wax from this shit.
Now look, there's a lot of more aiming skills that you need to practice, but for the time we got, this is what we have. So the actual results for this were kind of what you would expect. It kind of felt like we were trying to push a heavy car forward, but we only pushed for half of a second. Like, I think I saw the tires roll, but I'm not really sure. I felt like I was only getting warmed up to push the car more. This, however, was going to be absolutely nothing compared to the
120 hours I do later in the video.
But after doing 5 minutes a day for a week, I decided I definitely needed to do more. So from here, I bumped up to 15 minutes per day. And this is where I started to actually notice a little bit of a difference in my skill. So I started my 15 minutes by using the 5 minutes that we did beforehand. So 5 minutes of just running through the motions. Then for the remaining 10 minutes, I took each of the skill sets that I wanted to learn and I spent about 2 to 3 minutes on it. So after working about 4 to 5 skill sets, I was pretty much done for the day. So there are both pros and cons to 15 minutes. To start off with the good stuff, I was actually feeling really warm going into my matches. It kind of felt like I had like a hot meal on a cold day. You know what I'm saying? I just felt good. I also started to notice myself improving, although it was very slightly. But most importantly, I started to discover what areas I was kind of lacking in. And by that, I just mean, is my tracking bad or is my flicking bad? And is it my arm aim or my wrist aim? But here's where the cons come in. I feel like I didn't have enough time to properly work out those issues that I discovered. I just kind of got really warm, really comfortable with aiming, and then I would stop and not really have time to improve. It was actually kind of frustrating some days, because some days you just get motivation to just train your aim. I also started to notice that I had a little bit of a different problem each day. So sometimes my tracking will be better than my snapping, and my my snapping will be better than my tracking. Around 15 minutes per day, I feel like anybody could do this, and this is where I would recommend you doing the minimum amount of training. 15 minutes is really no time at all. If you say you don't have time to do this, I promise you, you're just not making time. It's just like going to the gym. So after a week of doing the 15 minutes, I didn't like how limiting it was, so I bumped up to half an hour per day. This time zone is where everything changed for me. This was like the Goldilocks zone. This was fucking peanut butter and jelly, man. This would marshmallows, bro. This would put the peas in the pod, dude. This is by far where I saw the most progress happen for the amount of time I put in. The way that I would structure it is we start off with the standard 5-minute warm-up. We did 10 minutes of kind of what I called identifying. So I'd figure out what those problem areas were for that day. And then I would spend the last 15 minutes of that half hour just practicing those areas. One thing I noticed very quickly was that I was severely lacking in some of the tasks that I did. For example, there's a bouncing track one that you got to do, and I was terrible with that. But I will say, if you have a task that you're just terrible at, but you're pretty good at all the other ones, most likely what you're experiencing is that you've played one game for so long, you just aren't used to it. So for instance, if you play CSGO and there's a tracker that's telling you to shoot stuff going over your head, probably not going to be as adept to that versus just balls on a flat line going across the screen. It just makes sense because that's the type of game that it is. Don't beat yourself up if you have tasks like this. It's okay. It's totally normal. Don't need to freak out about it. You're okay. Now, I wouldn't recommend skipping those tasks, but you definitely don't have to spend a lot of time on them, just because if you're going to stick with one game for a long while, you don't really need to spend your time training stuff that won't apply directly. This time around, I want to talk about the negatives of 30 minutes per day first. The first obvious one is that you have to spend half an hour a day committed to this. If you've ever been in like orchestra or band or learned some sort of instrument, growing up, your family probably made you practice that instrument for 30 minutes per day, because 30 minutes per day really is that sweet Goldilocks zone for the amount of effort you're going to put in versus the results you're going to get out. But it is a time commitment. And if you really think about it, your mouse kind of is an instrument. You need to practice over and over and over. Just like wanting to hit all of the notes in a song perfectly, you want to hit all those balls on the screen perfectly. With that out of the way, here's the good side of 30 minutes. 1, you get to really drill down to tasks that you feel you're weakest in. 2, I felt fantastic going into games. I always felt like I was ready for whatever was going to come my way. And 3, almost every single day, I felt like I was improving. I started hitting nasty headshots that I definitely would not have been able to do before. And most importantly, during community games, I was back on top being my competitive self, and I was winning a lot too. So after 30 minutes per day, I thought, well, what if I do an hour a day? And I did do an hour a day for a week, but honestly, it kind of just felt like a longer 30 minutes, which some days it was great. I loved having the extra time to work on those areas, but other days it wasn't really worth it. So then I had the bright idea of, well, what if I just train all of the time? Will I get really good really fast? And that spawned the idea for training for 120 hours straight. This also was the beginning of my downfall. This sucked so much. Going into this, I had 3 goals. My first goal was that I wanted to hit 100,000 points on the Grid Shot Ultimate. If you know anything about aim labs or aim training at all, hitting that 100,000 club is such a big milestone for a lot of people. It is very difficult to get into that club, kind of like Legendary All Skulls on in Halo or the Mile High Club in Call of Duty. My second goal is I wanted to go through every single Apex Legends aim trainer, all 482 of them, just to see if there's any goodies in there that I could use, which there was. And then goal number 3 was that I didn't want to quit this challenge. I really wanted to see how far I can go in 5 days, because if it's possible to get really good in only such a short period of time, I wanted to know about it. I love me some shortcuts. We started off by benchmarking day 1. This was going to give us a baseline to work with so that the rest of the days we can see how much we've improved or otherwise. Think about it like NASCAR. If you can get 1% better in NASCAR, you're not going from the middle of the pack towards the front of the pack. You're going beyond the pack, because in NASCAR, 1% difference is huge. Day 1 started off with a little bit of food, rest and relaxation, and then we got right into it. We started off strong, breaking a couple of personal records, and things were honestly looking pretty up. I continued to train very intensely for about 10 hours. I wanted to get the absolute most out of my 5 days here, so I didn't let up my intensity even for a second. Around 10 hours in, I did take a small break and I played Apex Legends for an hour. If you don't know, I'm actually doing a stream challenge where I have to stream Apex Legends every single day for 2023, and if I miss a day, I have to donate $1,000 to charity. So if you want to stop by stream, come hit me up. But after Apex, we met a fellow aim trainer called Hyojinx. Jinx. Jinx was a pretty cool dude, and he actually wound up introducing us to the voltaic benchmarks. If you're not familiar with voltaic and what they do, they're essentially a group of people who get together over their shared passion of aiming and just try to learn as much about aiming as possible in order to become the best aimers in the world. They have a lot of people signed onto their roster, such as His Watson and Elige, and they also have global championship aimers in their roster. The first ever Aim Labs tournament, I think 3 of their guys were in the top 5, and 1 of their guys actually won the tournament. These guys do not mess around when it comes to aim. No biggie. So for the last final hours of the night, I used the voltaic benchmarks in order to mark my aim. At the time in Aim Labs, I was about a platinum level player, but once I benchmarked myself for voltaic, I wound up being gold. Yeah, voltaic is not messing around. That actually humbled me a lot at that point and made me realize I wasn't as good at aiming as I thought I was. Again, shout out to Jinx for showing me those benchmarks. I love you, buddy. So I finished day 1 having streamed for 16.5 hours. I decided to go to bed to get some sleep. Once I woke up, I caught a glimpse of the issues that were to come. Because starting with day 2, I woke up with a little bit of tinnitus in my ear. And I don't know how else to explain this, but my eyeballs were tired and sore. It's kind of like if you were to just like spin your eyes around in a circle for like a while, they'll get tired. It was kind of that feeling, but elevated and all of the time. This was a little bit concerning because I still had 4 days to go at that point. But after I went out to get some food, I came back, got started on Aim Labs, and it kind of had gone away. Thankfully, all of that did go away because I wound up breaking a couple of more benchmarks whenever I came back. Most of my scores were pretty close to how they were the day before, but that did mean that I was becoming more consistent, which consistency is a good thing. Throughout day 2, we trained a lot more of the voltaic stuff as well as some of the apex stuff I was trying to get through. And overall, I felt really good about the day. I got tired a little bit earlier this day. I only aim trained for about 11.5 hours, but I went immediately to bed after. This was about 5 hours less than the day before, but I was starting to get really tired. And this would become a big issue for the rest of the following days. Going into day 3, I felt like somebody had beaten my skull up with a hammer. It felt like somebody took the marsh out the mellow, dude. Like I was just not there anymore. I was physically in pain. My eyes hurt. I had really bad tinnitus, which by the way, if you don't know what tinnitus is, it's like listening to a dog whistle all the time. To start off the day, I couldn't get myself out of my bed. I think I was scrolling on my phone for like 2 hours before I did get up. My bed was just made of Velcro that day. It just sucked trying to get out of that bed. On day 3, I was essentially forcing myself to go mentally and physically hurt myself, which obviously nobody wants to do. So this became an even bigger issue as we continued down the line. So I started off day 3 by benchmarking my results just like the previous 2 days, and then I blacked out. I remember sitting in bed and I remember finally doing my benchmarks for that day, but after that, I still can't remember anything. I actually had to look back in my VOD and rewatch hours worth of VOD in order to see what actually happened. Apparently, I trained my aim for 5 hours and then I went back to bed after having only been awake for 8 hours total. Your average person, by the way, stays up for 16 hours a day. So I woke up on day 4 feeling way worse than the day before, but I kept pushing through. I was really determined to complete this challenge and hit the 3 goals that I set out to hit. The issue was that my head was pounding. My entire upper body ached like I had some sort of head cold. And at this point, it was becoming very, very difficult to bring myself to complete this challenge. Whenever I woke up, I think I was on my phone for like 4 hours before I finally got up. I was originally thinking about telling my stream that I just slept for a really long time because it would have been about 16 hours of sleep at this point, but I don't like lying. It's not something I want to do. Once I finally did get into stream, it was very lackluster. I did an hour of aim training in the morning, which I don't remember at all. Seriously, I trained twice this day. And then later that day, after having gone to sleep, at least that's what I told stream, I can't remember if I slept or not, I woke up 8 hours later, and after doing my benchmarks for day 4, I lost all motivation to try and complete this challenge. I just couldn't do it anymore. So I made an ultimatum to chat. I said, I'm gonna do my hour of daily Apex, that's required of me. After my Apex, if I felt better, I would keep trying to aim train. I wanted to join the 100,000 club on grid shot. At this point, I'd already beaten all of the Apex benchmarks. But my third goal of not quitting was something that stuck with me. So after my hour of Apex, with my mental health declining rapidly and my physical health going down the slope, I decided I was gonna call it quits. So unfortunately, we did not make it to day 5. But now that it's a few months later, we can look at this in a more positive light and see what the actual results were. How much did I actually improve over this 5-day stretch? I declined over the 4 days. we got as low as 15% worse in some of the areas. If we did 15% worse in NASCAR, we wouldn't lose 15% more races. We would just lose all of the fucking race. 15% difference would probably take you from a professional level player probably down to below a semi-pro, if not more, honestly. So why did this happen? Why did I get worse over time? Overtraining. Overtraining very quickly is essentially when you do too much of the same thing and your body cannot adapt quick enough. The human body is designed to adapt to things. If you do push-ups every day, your muscles are going to adapt to allow you to do more push-ups because your body realizes, oh, hey, this guy's gonna be doing push-ups. Better make sure we can do more. Otherwise, maybe we can't survive, right? Because your brain is always in caveman, Neanderthal, I gotta survive mode. But whenever your body is adapting, you have to give your body time to adapt. You'll never become fit by staying in a gym for 8 hours every day for a week, but you will get fit spending half an hour a day in a gym every single day for 3 months. It sucks that you can't do it quickly, but that's just how the human body works. Okay, look, before you click off, the most important thing I need to leave you off with is what you can take away from this. First off, if you can do it, do half an hour every single day. It was fantastic. If you can't do that, do a 15 to 20 minute regimen. If you do anything less than that, it's not really gonna be worth it and you'll probably just feel like you're wasting your time. The most important thing I can recommend for you though is that if you're trying to make this a daily habit, follow the rule of zero-sum days. What that means is that no matter what your goal is, if you've reached the end of your day and you don't have time for anything because you gotta get up early in the morning and you realized you haven't done your daily task, do one task, go to bed. It might not be the grandest way of doing it, but at least you've committed to it and it'll keep that momentum going and you will continue to build and improve upon that skill. Do not go to bed without having done at least something that day. Something. I promise you, you will see results if you do at least that.